How are you doing? I am so glad that you are joining us today. I hope you had a wonderful Easter. So what I wanted to talk about for the next 3 days is something that I've been thinking about since this quarantine kind of locked us all down. And it comes out of two things that I see shared on social media a lot. Two predictions, really. One, that kind of 9 months from now, we're going to see a big baby boom, a COVID-19 baby boom. And that makes sense. I mean, when people kind of get stuck in the same space, that is generally what we see. The ice storm in Quebec would be the first example that always comes to my mind, that there was a little mini baby boom after that, I think sometime in the 90s. The other is that at the end of all of this, we're going to see a spike in divorce rates, in relationship breakdowns, and again, it makes sense. It's distressing. It's probably true. Anecdotal evidence coming out of China as the quarantine is lifting there is showing a big uptick in people seeking after divorce lawyers. So yeah, it seems like this pressure of quarantine, of stay in place, of self-isolation, is putting pressure on damaged relationships or frail relationships, and they're not able to withstand the pressure. And again, that's understandable, but I think preventable. So I want to talk about that for the next 3 days. 2 days on relationships and 1 day on a parent-child relationship. And I should say at the top, I am not an expert. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I've been married for 12 years. I've been a parent for 11, which again does not make me an expert in any stretch of the imagination. But Jesus does teach us some really helpful things when it comes to relationships, when it comes to marriages. And Jesus' followers tell us some pretty interesting things too. And I just want to explore those with you for a few minutes. So the first that we come to, what is probably the most important, is this command that Jesus gives to his disciples just before he's arrested, just before he goes to the cross. It's this new command that he's giving, and this new command is that we will love one another as he has loved us, and that the entire world will see this love demonstrated by his followers, by Jesus' followers. Well, what does that mean? We use the word love for a lot of different things. I mean, in this context specifically, Jesus is saying, I need you to look at my example. I need you to see the things that I do and understand that that's the love that I'm calling you to. The question is, what did Jesus do? He died. He gave out his entire life for his friends, for us, for you, for me. He gave out his entire life. He held nothing back. It was a sacrificial love. This particular teaching of Jesus, the disciples, the apostles, they run with it. Whenever they're trying to teach how one another should behave, how we should interact with one another, with each other, how we should interact with non-believers, it's always the ethic that is being pointed back to. Always, always, always. So Paul gave some advice to husbands and wives. And if I am not an expert, Paul is not an expert. He was never married, he never had kids, but still, he gave some advice. And I do think it's pretty good if you get past the first century wording of everything. And I've just chopped it down to grab a couple of verses, but this is what we see. We see Paul saying, submit to one another out of our reverence for Christ. And there it is again. How are we supposed to interact with one another? How are we supposed to love one another? Through submission. What does submission mean? Submission means that I'm gonna love like Jesus loved. Because Jesus loved sacrificially. He gave everything he had to the other. So how do I do that? Well, I love sacrificially. I give everything that I have to another. In the context of a marriage relationship, Paul breaks it down a little bit more. Wives, submit to your husbands. Meaning, you need to demonstrate that Christ-like love of giving everything you have of putting the other person first. And in the first century, no one was batted an eye of that. Of course, that's what wives had to do. But then Paul kept going, and he said, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved. And there it is again. And there we need to remind ourselves, well, how did Christ love? Sacrificially, by giving everything that he had, all that he was, pouring out his entire life. So what does that mean for husbands and wives? It means we have to get off the give and take wagon. We have to give the you get one, then I get one, then you get one, then I get one treadmill. It means we have to stop trying to figure out who wins. Because every time an individual wins, the relationship itself suffers. And listen, I know that right now it's people are more stressed than they usually are. I mean, the biggest contributing factor to marital breakup is money. And right now, everybody's worried about money. So what do? How do we insulate ourselves from the stresses that we know we're going to have? Because we know that we're going to have stress. We know that these pressure points are coming. So what do? We build a continual practice of mutually loving one another through submission. So I put down my needs and you put down your needs. And we submit to each other out of reverence, out of love for Christ. Because Christ gave so much to us, what do we even really need? So we put down our needs, we put down our wants, and we find the path forward so that it's not me winning or you winning, it's not us taking turns, but that we are mutually moving forward together in mutual love. Now this is easy to say, but it's pretty hard to do. But that is our call today. That is our charge. Because these are stressful times. And stress is not our friend. And when we are at our best, that's when we again need to lean on who Jesus asked us to be. Because at the end of the day, we can always put the other person first. That's all I wanted to say today. I really thank you for joining me. I look forward to continuing this conversation tomorrow.